And it's a set of data, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually the most primitive form of data structure. So let's talk. I'm just going to put a comment here. I'll put more comment later, but so let's just an array of integers just to show you how it goes. So the reason I say kind of like a list, there's actually an object called a list, which has some differences from a straight array. The main difference is that, as we'll see, arrays have to have a size. All right. So this is, you could declare an array just like this, right? Before you use it, you have to give it a size. So I'm going to actually I'm going to show you lots of ways to utilize arrays, which sometimes drives people nuts because people would rather just have one way to do things, but I really think you should see. So I'm going to initialize this and say equal int, and let's just make it a 10-element array. So this creates an array of 10 elements. So a couple of things about these square brackets indicate that it's not just an integer, but it's an array of integers. Does that make sense? So the square bracket is used, in C#, it's used for any kind of collection, which means any kind of object that contains more than one thing. And an array is basically like a variable name, except that it contains a set of things. And they're all always of the same type, right? Now, it can get really complicated, and we're not going to go there, and that you can have an array of arrays. You know, so if you wanted to, you could have an array of arrays, and each array inside of that array could be of a different kind. I don't know why anybody would do that. They do it sometimes in computer science just to show you it can be done. You could also have an array of objects. So later when we make classes, like if you had a customer object that had a bunch of different properties, you could have an array of customers. Right? So you're not limited to just numbers, not just int, for instance. But the general format of an array is square brackets, give it a name, any name you want, equals new, and we haven't talked about new much, but it's an int, and then you can give it a size. I'm going to do this very manually just to show you what it looks like. This is not the way you would usually populate an array, but I'm going to show you how to do it really slow, just so you can see kind of what goes on here. The new keyword, anybody know what that means? You use it with objects, and an array is a type of object. We did it with random equals new random, right, too? Yeah. All right. So new initializes an object. It initializes it and loads it into memory and makes it available to use. That's essentially what new does. New is a keyword for initializing objects, and an array is an object. So I'm going to just, as I said, let's make this 5 elements because I don't want to type that much. So I'm going to say my array square bracket 0 equals 1. My array square bracket 1 equals 3. I'm just randomly, in my own mind, randomizing what number. My array 2 equals 14 for whatever reason. My array 3 equals 12. My array 4 equals 8. And again, you can do whatever numbers, I don't care. I just wanted to show you how an array is actually laid out. All right. So there's only one variable name, but the square brackets can contain what they call index numbers. So an array is indexed, and the index always starts at 0 and then goes up. This is how many elements are in the array, but it's counting 0. So the highest index is 4 if you have 5 elements. Does that make sense? If you go beyond, if I did a my array 5 and then tried to read that, it would fail. It would give me an overload. So just for a couple of examples here, I'll just access some elements. So if I wanted to do console write line, I'll just say the third element is cat type. And placeholder, and then I'll just do my array so it'll be 2. And I'm going to drag in my console write line, just so that it's. So this would just return 2. It should return 14, right? That's the third element. So when I run it, and then I'd have to zoom it. ++, you can see that it is 14. So you can access the elements by their index number, right? Again, remembering that it's always the one less than its actual, that you're starting at 0. So it's 2 is your third element. Does that make sense? The index number, you can do that. You can do all sorts of things with these. I'm going to do a couple of things with this array, and then I'll show you some other ways to do arrays. Yeah?
Could you have started at 1?
No.
Okay.
Arrays have to start at 0. If you started at 1, it would just leave 0 blank. It always starts at 0. Any collection in C# always starts at 0. And I think that's true of every language that I know. Does anybody know the language where you can start it other than 0 on an array? Computer people always start counting at 0. Seems to me like there is a way to set up a Visual Basic array that starts at 1, but it's the only language I know where that might be possible. I'm going to show you a couple of ways. So I'm going to do a for loop. So I'm going to say for int I equals 0. Now you could say I is less than 5, or you can say that I is less than my array.length, which is exactly the same thing. The advantage of this is that if you don't know the length of the array, it will automatically find it, right? So there's a property for arrays called length, which is essentially, in this case, would be equal to 5. I++. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to loop through the array.
What does the I++ do now?
You remember it increments?
Okay.
It goes up by 1 each time. So if I do my array and I put in here a I, so let's do console write line. Okay, so this will loop through the array, and it will print out all the elements. Can you see how it does that? I will walk through it here in a moment. I is a counter. Starts at 0. So the first time we loop, this will be equal to 0, right? When it comes up, it'll increment. I will be equal to 1, and it will be the element 1. Right? So basically, it's just going to go through, and it will write out every element in that array. And I, as it iterates up, will become the index number. You know, that variable will become the index number. So loops like this work really well with, for loops work really well with arrays. So let's just, I'm going to zoom up to run it. Okay. See, and there it prints down through it. I'm going to show you some other things you could do. Questions on that? One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to total it, and I'm going to show you how to do it in a loop. I'll show you a cheat shortcut in a bit. But I'm going to say that I'm going to declare outside of here. Let's get the zoom off so you can see more of this. So outside of the loop, I'm going to declare a int sum, and I'm going to say it equals 0. And down here, I'm going to do sum plus equal, sum plus equals, I can't type, my usual problem, plus equals I. And then I'll put sum. What is the plus equal doing, do you think?
Is it adding everything up?
It's adding, so sum, basically sum plus equal means sum is equal to sum plus whatever. Actually, we don't want I there. We want my array I, right? And then square brackets around the I. So what it'll do is it'll take each element of the array and add it to the existing sum, to the existing total. So let's see if that works. And I need to zoom that, or you can't see it at all. So the sum is 38. Is that correct? 4, 6. Oh yeah, okay. As I said, I'll show you a couple of cheat ways to do this in a moment. Keep hitting that minus instead of this minus. Questions on that? Plus equal is an operator we haven't seen. You can do times equal. You can do divided equal. You can do minus equal. And basically, what this means, if I were to write it out as a comment, is equivalent to sum equals sum plus my array I. That's exactly, I mean, this plus equal is the equivalent of this. If we were to do an average, and again, as I said, I'll show you a cheat in a minute, but console I haven't done the math, but you can actually do the math in this. So I'm actually doing the math here, and I cast sum to double, so there wouldn't be an integer division. And then I'm dividing it by the length of the array, because that's how you get a general average, right? The total divided by the number of elements. So that would work also. And then I'm going to show you some other things about arrays here in a moment. I'm going to see if that runs. Do you guys need a minute? Let me run and then I'll come back. So the average is 7.6, which I would assume is about right.
What could be wrong if you get this
You didn't cast it to double.
So wait, what's casting it double do again?
It makes it so it can have decimal parts.
Okay, thank you.
So if you just did sum, you would just be getting a whole bunch of it.
Why?
If you didn't put the double, it'd just be a whole number.
It would just be a whole number, right? So basically, if you don't do, you'll get 7, and this one will give you 7.6 double. But without casting one of the sides to the division to a double, it's an integer division, which means no decimal parts. Question?
Zero.
And I'm saying this.
Oh. See, I didn't even put any answers. I just did doubles. Yeah. If it needs a decimal, I'm not even gonna start with it. I'm just gonna do it straight.
Shouldn't have done that. Okay, let's go back. Don't click that part. Click the other part. Should go to the line where the column is, but it's putting it here.
Oh.
So do we have an extra?
That
one. Yes.
He didn't say anything, but I kind of
Thank
thought it was.
you. Okay.
How would you get the max or min? I'm going to, as I said, I'm going to show you some sheets in a minute that you can use on your assignment. But can you guys think of the logic of how you would do that? There will be an if, right? So, as I said, there are some built-in things that can help you, but this, you should know, should be able to see this. So I'm going to basically just do the same kind of loop, but I'm going to do different things inside of it. All right. So instead of writing that, I'm going to say if. So actually, one of the things I'm going to do is declare out here. I'm going to do int max equals 0. It's important that you give it a value here if you're going to use it inside here, because it won't let you do the stuff we're going to do if it doesn't have an initial value. So that's why I'm saying it's equal to 0 initially. So I am going to say that if I, or my array I, is greater than max. Okay, so if that's the case, then max equals my array I.
You put curly braces on that end, or could you just leave it on?
You could actually leave it like this. So the caveat here is that you do not need curly braces if there's only one command for the if statement. If there's more than one command, you have to have the curly braces. So it's probably better to not worry yourself about it and always do curly braces.
All right.
But this will work. But I'll do the curly braces just to be consistent with what I say. I often, so if you had two commands there, you would have a problem. All right, so if we do console write line max, so what it's doing, does it make sense what it's doing? It's taking every number in the array, and it starts at 0. If the number is bigger than the maximum, then it assigns it to the maximum, right? So it just goes through each number and just replaces the max until it finds something that's nothing's bigger than. So in our array, 14 is the biggest, right? So the test with this would be zero in these things too. It's just like the array. These placeholders are essentially in a place where they start with 0. If you had a second one, it would have 1 in it. You know, it's essentially an array. So I'm going to zoom up and run, and then we can come back to it. So the maximum value is 14. Right, so it found it. I wanted to show this because your assignment actually has some of this stuff in it, but if you ever do a job interview or something, they'll expect you to know how to do this without what I'm going to show you next. Also, most languages do not have what I'm going to show next, which is my array sum. So I'm doing all of them right here. Most languages do not have these methods associated with an array. So we did it by hand, right? We went through and we added all the numbers. We went through and we added all the numbers and then divided it by the thing to get the average. The max, we did it by doing an if and comparing values. You could do the exact same thing with a minus, just reverse this sign, right? But the thing is, it has those methods built into it. So you could just do dot max, dot sum, dot max. Again, I'll run this and then I'll talk it through. See, it has just the same sum 38, 7.6, 14, and the minimum is 1. Which was that? It's a lot easier to do it that way. But I think it's good to know how to do it. This is sort of a minimal logic thing. By the way. Questions on that? And so this is sort of just the basics of an array. I'm going to show you some other stuff about arrays in a minute. No questions on this so far? Is that because it makes perfect sense or it makes no sense?
It seems pretty clear.
Okay.
Once we do the homework, I'll try the question.
Okay. I'm smelling food from downstairs again. It smells good. So I think I may just save this one and start a new one because it's going to get really messy when I do the other. Did you have a question?
Well, just for future reference, I was wondering if it would be correct to say, or should we not say this, that arrays or lists that are indexed and have prescribed size.
That actually is not a bad definition. That's actually a pretty good definition. So when you talk about, when you mentioned list, a list is just like an array except it doesn't have a set size. There's lots of more sophisticated data tools than arrays, but arrays are in every language. I mean, JavaScript has arrays. Every language out there has an array. I mean, they all have this basic structure. And for modest, really modest data needs, this can work. You can even populate an array from a database. But you generally, if it gets bigger than a few dozen elements, you probably want to use a different kind of structure. But arrays are good for just storing, a little bit of data locally. And they're low impact. I don't know what they say. A lot of the other objects have more overhead. So these are about as minimal as they get. So do you guys have all of this? I don't need to save it, but I'm going to. If it runs, it's saved. And then I'm going to do a new project. And it'll be, for lack of imagination today, array examples 2. Again, I'm doing this just so it doesn't get too messy. So I'll post both or all 3 or however many it takes. So this is basically just going to be more array examples, and I might comment this more before I post it. The full header. Let's do, so we did an integer. Now you can do, I said arrays don't have to be numbers. They can be strings. I'm going to show you, now you can do a string. What do we want to put in here for strings? Let's just call it teams. Put in some football teams or something. This is one way you can do it. New string, and we could give it a size. Okay, that's so you can declare it just exactly the way you did the other one. But I want to show you a different way you could declare this. And this assumes that you already know what all your values are. So I'm going to do string teams equals, and you can do like a curly braces here. who is in our division? Let's see, Seahawks, Cardinals. Cardinals. Should be able to spell that. Cardinals. That's not right either. How do you spell it?
D-I-N.
B-I-N. Cardinals. There we go. Rams, yeah. And 49ers. Is that all that's in our thing?
The first name, period, and then a comment.
Oh, it should be a comma. Thank you. That's why there was red underline there. And then just do a semicolon. That's another way to declare an array. And you're populating it in the same time you're declaring it. And notice I don't give it a size because it's smart enough to count. The size will be whatever this is. So the size is 4, right? And the highest index is 3. So if we were to do a loop for this,
So it's either, you can either do one or the other.
yeah, I mean, you can declare it this way or you can declare it the other way, right?
List, like,
What?
never mind.
Go ahead, I just.
Well, the other time we did, we listed the number and then we put the.
Right, and I wanted to show you, so there's other ways to populate it too. So we'll do another array here in a moment where we add them dynamically.
Mhm.
All right. So this is the way we did it before. You could do that, right? You could do that here and it would work just fine. This is a little bit less typing, right? So I'm just going to do for int I equals 0, I is less than teams.length, I plus plus. We'll just iterate through these. Console right line. Do we just want to do, I'm not going to do a teams square bracket I, rather than just do, so this will just loop through them and do I.
Why is it sometimes, when you have those dot functions, they have parentheses.
And sometimes don't. That's actually a really good question. So if it is a method, how do you know that it's a method? That's a little bit hard to tell sometimes. If it is a method, it has parentheses. If it's like here, length is a, if I zoom that enough. So I want to do the dot. So one of the ways you can tell is that, notice length has a wrench. That means it's a property. I have no idea why methods have boxes, cubes, or whatever those are. But those are methods. So these are methods, and then the
Are the boxes kind of like functions, you know, how in high school we talked about function boxes?
that might be where that comes from, because they are essentially functions. And in fact, if we were doing this in C++, we would call them functions instead of methods. But they're the same thing, right? And like a function, these can do a calculation and just return the answer, or they can just do the calculation. They don't necessarily return anything. But we'll deal with that. I don't know if there's any other. I was looking to see. There's no lightning bolts on this. Lightning bolts are for events, but we'll deal with events later. So it does give you a little bit of an indication as to what things are by the drop-down list. All right, if I were to run this, I guess I kind of want to leave it zoomed.
You wanna put it in
Oh, I do. Otherwise, it's just going to poof, just like it just did.
Oh, 'cause I didn't add that.
Yeah, because we didn't add the read line.
How do you put that into where you can just drag it in again?
So what you want to do is just, so you need the toolbox over here, and I have it pinned, and then you can just highlight this and then just drag it over. You can put whatever you want over there. Later when we do, so you have pin it, and then just that little pin,
Oh, there it is. Okay.
and then highlight it and then just drag it over there, and it will be there whenever you want. There's also, I don't know if I want to show you right now, but there's code samples. You can, is it from tools? I forget where it is. That's why I don't want to go looking right now. But there's a place where you can get it to insert codes. Like if you can't remember the syntax for a for statement, it'll do a blank, an empty for statement for you. Things like that. I think that's better after you know how to type them yourself, though. All right, so that's another way to declare these. Let's do another one where we enter, do it just where we enter it somewhat dynamically. I'm going to do string. Actually, first I'm going to do, well, let's do it this way. String food, since I'm getting hungry. We'll just do an array of food. All right. Now, this is actually okay for a declaration. You can't use foods yet, right, because it isn't initialized. But you can declare it. You can declare it at the top if you like your declarations at the top. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to ask how many foods do you want to list? And what we'll do is we'll just do a, no, it needs a semicolon. I'm just going to do int number equals int parse console read line, which, you know, we could do a try parse, but I'm going to do it just as console. So we're going to ask how many we want to list. Then we can initialize our array by saying foods equals new string number. Right, so you can use a variable for the initialization. So you can kind of decide on the fly how big your array is going to be. This has to have a value before you do this, right? There are some languages that forbid this, but C# allows. In C++, this has to be a constant. You can't do it as a variable. What?
Like, why would other languages have done this?
Because if this doesn't have a valid number, this whole thing's going to crash. All right, so then I'm going to and this is, in this case, we really don't know how big our array is going to be, right? So I'm going to do int I equals 0. I is less, that should be a semicolon. I is less than foods.length. This time we really need to use foods.length because we have no idea how long it could be. Although you could also say I is less than number. That would also work. Does that make sense? I++. And then what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll just add stuff to the array. So I'm going to do console write line, add a food, and then I'll do so foods square bracket I equals a console read line. And you don't have to parse when it's a string. So that will populate the array. And then I'm going to show you, I probably shouldn't, for each, and this is a different kind of loop. You never have? We haven't talked about it, so I'm just introducing it right now.
I guess I would, and I was trying out the best time. What's different about the for each loop?
So the for each loop doesn't have a set number, right? It doesn't have a counter. So what it does, and it only works with objects, right? So what it does is when you have an array of objects, and so strings are objects actually too, you can loop through it, and it basically, just looking at foods as an array, we're saying for every string in that array, output the string.
So with strings, it's better to use a for each loop?
Not necessarily, it's just another way to do it. Where it's really useful is when you have objects like customers and things like that. But it's another way to do it. I could do this as a for loop and it would have exactly the same output. There's a little less typing here. For what it's worth, if you were really pressed for processor time, this takes more processing than this. Because this has to read the array, figure out its length, whereas you're kind of giving those values here. It has to figure out how many times to loop. I mean, it has to do a lot more. But it does it for you, whereas this, you've told it how far to loop. You're basically giving it. So let's run that. So, okay, so let's zoom to. All right, so we're up there. Let's minus that. Okay, so how many foods do you want to list? Let's don't do a lot. 4 or 5? 4 sounds good. So we'll add a food. Pizza? What other food do you want?
Sushi. Yeah, sushi's better than last. I was going to say salad.
We could do a salad too. Salad. One more food. Meatloaf. And I will do it as 2 words because I mean leaf. All right, so when I press enter, it prints them all out again, right? Piece of sushi salad meatloaf, just to show the for each works.
So the for each was displaying it back.
Yes, the for each was displaying it back. So if we go back and look at that, let me just zoom down so you can see more of the code. So the for each is just looping through it to do this. Actually, the for each wouldn't work here because there's nothing in there yet. Right, the for each can only do it when the array is populated. It can't. It doesn't know how much, it can only do for the objects that are there. Here we're adding objects. Right? So
Where did S come from?
S is just a variable.
What about
For each string S. This could be anything. This could be X, this could be Joe, it could be anything you want maybe.
What about the in there?
So this is in this array.
Oh, all right.
Foods is the name of our array. Right?
All right.
You can also do this with, like, there's a object called a data table or a list or there's all sorts of objects that are collections of other objects, and so you look for whatever is in that object,
All right.
in that collection of objects.
So we didn't have an array for food, so.
What?
Did we have an array for food?
We declared a food. We declared foods equals string square brackets foods. That declares it as an array.
Okay,
This initialized it to the whatever number we just said, right?
okay.
So the array is initialized. If you don't initialize the array, it will crash. Now, I want to show you one other kind of crash. What if I said instead of, what if I do a for equal here? Does anybody know what had happened there? You'll get an out of bounds error. Let me do it and show it. What? Yeah, so you'll get one beyond. So the highest index is one less than the length. If the length is 3, the highest index is 2. But this will take it up to 3, and it'll crash it. I'll show you. You can't go beyond the bounds of the index. So let's zoom up a little bit. I think we're still at 150, but let's, oops, wrong way. All right, so how many foods do you want to list? Let's just say 3. And so I'm going to add a food, milkshake. I'm not sure that's a food. But, what? Yeah. Popcorn. Is popcorn one word? Yeah. Add a food. Why am I having trouble thinking of food? Hot dogs. That sounds good. Okay, so now it's going to do one more. And the thing is, there's only, this is where it goes beyond the bounds. So I'll just say, go back to pizza. And it will crash. And the error is index out of range. Okay, so if we look at the value of I, so foods is 3. I is right now is equal to 3. But the highest index is 2, right? Because it always starts at 0. There's 3 elements, but the highest index is 2 because it goes 0, 1, 2, which is 3 elements. So if you do that, you'll get an index out of range. And it's fairly common if you're not careful. That's a real common error, to just go beyond the limits of your array. So I'm trying to think of what else about arrays I haven't shown you. You can do string. You could also do double. I mean, literally, array can be of anything. Right? You could do math with the arrays too. If you, you know, you can multiply what the value is in one array versus another array, just by using the index numbers, because you can access the individual elements by their index number. Do you guys want to see a 2-dimensional array? None of your assignments require it, but it wouldn't hurt to see one.
So how do we fix the error that's coming out?
So if you have that, then what you want to do is get rid of the equal sign.
Oh, right there?
No, what are you doing there? What did you enter there?
Here?
Oh,
I put in the runner.
yeah. A lot of times if it crashes during runtime, it's because you entered a value wrong. And again, you could do a try parse, which I didn't do because it takes a while. But you could do a try parse to catch that. Later, I'll show you other ways to catch those errors. Because ultimately, when you write real programs, you don't want it to crash on the user. If they do something wrong, you just want to say, please do something right. And there's lots of ways to make that happen. In real life programming, probably 2/3 of your time is going through and making sure it doesn't crash.
Would there be an easy way to put things in alphabetical order? Like, let's say the 4 teams. Like, would there be an easy way to output those teams in an alphabetical order?
you had, so I think there is, I'm not sure if it's, I don't think there's, I'm looking to see, you had that though, didn't you? You had the alphabetical?
I did ascending order.
Oh, ascending order, no, order by ascending, order by,
I did ask order delay.
oh, as ordered array might do it, actually. I wonder, right? Order by, sort the elements in ascending order according to a key. What would the key be?
Did you do like 8 plus?
Well, you know, you might be able to,
If there is,
let me think about it. So there are some functions that would probably work on this. Each of these has a numeric value. But it gets a little bit weird because we'd probably only want to use like the first letter, and then if two had the same first letter, I mean, if we were doing it manually, we would have to, what?
I've got a line of code.
What is it? Well, array.sort. We could try that. As I was thinking, so I think, so we do array dot sort, and then you have to give it like foods, right? Oh, well, it's been declared. Oh, it is before it's declared. Never mind. Array dot teams. I think what we want to do is teams. Just trying this. Is it not like? Maybe I just want to do array sort teams by itself. Let's try this. So I've supposedly sorted it. I'm just going to try running it. So I repeated it, and it did alphabetize it. I mean, it's not very clear because of the way it is there, but
So array.sort.
array.sort, that's much easier than I was thinking. I'm going to do a right line to separate it. So array, notice it has there's an actual object called array. It has a method called sort, and you have to pass it in an array to sort. Again, C# has all sorts of functions that you will not find in other languages. Just all right, so let's do last thing I think we'll do with array I'm just trying to think if there's anything in your assignments that I'm not covering. Random, we did random last time, and one of the things that I had you do was to assign things in a random, from a random array. So you create a random number just like you did last time for a for loop. And assigning things is just like this, except you'd be assigning a number from the array rather than a console read line. Does that make sense? You just loop through equals ran.next, whatever. So I'll let you guys work that out, but I want to show you, and there's nothing like this in the assignment. This is just to show you, you can have multi-dimensional arrays. And you can have as many dimensions as you want, although once you get beyond 3 dimensions, I think it's getting pretty weird. Not only because, so 4 dimensions, it also can get to the point, if you get much beyond 3 or 4 dimensions, you're putting a huge strain on your processor. It starts to get really complicated, but there are times when you might want to. So I'm going to show you a multi-dimensional. I'm only going to show you a 2-dimensional, if I can remember how to do it in C#. So I'm going to do string. I think it just does like this. Books equals new books. So I want, how many books do we want? This is how many rows you want, and the other sort of how many columns you want. What? It would be new string, thank you. This is the way you do it here. This is not how you do it in Java, but I always confuse the two because I teach both. All right, so this comma here means that you can have multiple dimensions. If you wanted another dimension, you just do another comma, another element. And again, it gets really weird. I'm going to do this like we did the first one so that you can kind of see how you would lay this out. So I am going to do string, whoops, not string, books, square brackets, 0, whoops, 0, comma, 0. And I'm going to do this as the title of a book. I've been thinking of watching the movies again. I don't know if I'll ever reread the books. I've read them about 5 times. Books, 0, 1. So this, again, this is the row. The first number is the row, and the second number is the column. Equals J R R token. Okay. Books. So second row, 1. Second column, 0. And the space isn't necessary, but just to make it more readable. Let's just do Ulysses. It's supposed to be a Y, a U. So this is the second column of this, which would be, I'm going to do the author again, James Joyce. All right, so let's do books 2. This is the highest because we only had 3, so it would be 2, 0. I don't know that you have to do the same books if you don't want. Books 2, 1. equal Thomas. Okay, so this is a two-dimensional array. It could get a lot weirder, even in 2 dimensions, because you could have more than 2 columns, right? So you could basically create like a table there. And if you do 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions, it gets fairly weird really quickly because of all the different permutations of these numbers, right? Of the index numbers. The only place I know where they do that is in physics sometimes for matrix mathematics. But you can, I mean, there are things you can do. So, how do you use something like this?
Red line books, maybe? I'm not sure.
So let's do, first of all, I'm going to say like a console read line. Do we want to enter a title or an author? Okay, so, oh, not read line, write line. And then we'll do let's do string title equals console read line. Okay. So let's say we just want to do just get the author. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a loop. We could do a for each, or we could do a, let's do a for int I equals 0, I is less than, and length is a little bit weird here, but the length is 3. So we're, but you could just write 3 there, I plus plus. So we have to go through here, and what we're going to do is say if title, let's do equals, so let's see if I can remember how I want to do this. So I is the row, and we want the 0. But so if it's equal to the 0 part, right? So this is the row, this is the just thinking that, right? Yeah. So if it's equal to the title, which is the 0 part on each of these, right? 0, 0, 0. That's the title. Then what we'll do is we will return because the second part is the author. I'm going to put an else here. Okay, so if we spell the title wrong or something. Does that make sense? So I is counting the row. The 0 column is the title, and the 1 column is the author. So if they enter a title and it matches a title in the array, then we return the author. If nothing matches, it just says no book by that name. Again, you can do some fairly complex things with these. None of your assignments have multi-dimensional arrays, but I wanted to show you a multi-dimensional array. And again, it's sort of a simple way to store data temporarily. You need a minute here. And then we're going to be about done for the day. I think I've covered most of what I have to say about arrays. Although I was going to have you do an exercise for arrays. We'll do that, and then we'll be done. And as usual, I'll probably give you Wednesday to work on the arrays. Thursday, yeah, whatever day. Whatever day the next one is. All right, so I'm going to run this.
So you don't plan on lecturing on Thursday?
I don't plan on lecturing on Thursday, no. But I was, well, let's see what we get. I might get an error too. So I still have the foods here. So out of food, I said 3. So pizza. I actually get tired of pizza, but pizza. All right, so we'll enter a title. So let's do for a title. I'll do Ulysses, which is right in the middle. Oh, so I got an error too. You know what? I think it's the length. So it's an exception out of length. So we should have 3 elements, right? I is less than 6. No wonder. As I said, length is a little bit weird on a multi-dimensional array. It was counting all of the elements in it.
So we just want to put 3.
I'm just going to put it as 3. Foods, let's do 2. All right, so we enter a title, and I'll do Ulysses again. And it returns, actually it returned James Joyce and no book by that name. Why did it do that? Oh, I know why. Because when it hit the first book, it was not by that name, right? This works better if we take this out. What it was doing for every element in the list, it compared. There were 3 elements, so it says no book by that name, James Joyce, no book by that name. Because it was comparing each one to each.
I'm getting an out of range exception.
Right, change it from books linked to 3. And where did you need me to go?
Can you just scroll up a little bit?
Sure, let me unzoom a little too.
And then could you go up to wherever you added the books and authors?
Is that far enough up?
Yeah.
Yeah. It should be 0. I excuse me, because right, like I 1.
Oh, I want to have.
As I said, there's no assignment for this. This is just to give you a, because you will hear about multi-dimensional arrays, and they can be useful. Particularly if you're trying, I mean, basically this becomes like a table if you needed to, because you could have multiple columns. Instead of 2, you could have 5 here. Still a 2-dimensional array, but you'd have, instead of 0, 1, you'd have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it'd be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, right? And then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the column names. Also, there's nothing in this to keep you straight. Like I just decided that The 0 value is the title, and the 1 value is the author. That's entirely up to me to keep that straight. There's nothing in the array that'll help you keep those things straight.
So if you're putting in the book title, you'd have to put like the commas or the periods and all that in. It's not gonna, like for J.R.R. Tolkien, you need to do J period.
Yes, it's going to be an exact match.
Okay.
And you could get a whole lot more sophisticated if you wanted to, but it would involve a lot of programming where you could, basically say, you could do some string manipulation stuff to say that if it's Tolkien or if it's J.R.R. Tolkien, or if, you could look for all the different options and things. This isn't meant to be a sophisticated search thing.
Okay.
You
I
look
was just
puzzled.
wondering how you would. That's what I was just wondering about.
Would you be able to zoom out from things?
There's enough for you.
Right, because you said if title equals book. So we basically saying if the title is that, we just write out, you should write out the author. Well, but except you should limit it if you use it. Oh, it's ignoring that phrase. It's ignoring the.
Yeah.
All right, are we ready? One last thing. I will post both of these, and I'll comment them a little bit.
Where do you put them up and post that?
On the blog, if you go to the syllabus, there's a thing that says blog. All right, so the other thing I want to do, this is for you guys to have a practice. So I am going to go to, I think I'm going to stop the video. That's one thing I'm going to do.